Hey ladies and gentlemen, hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. Today I'm going to be showing you what I think could be the new meta for pushing Nightmare Dungeons as high as you possibly can on your rogue. I just want to start off by saying that this build has honestly taken me by complete surprise because I wasn't hopeful about barrage builds at all by any means, but it has got out of control burst damage, amazing survivability, and phenomenal crowd control. I'm currently completing Nightmare Dungeons 20 levels above my own level on World Tier 4, fighting mobs that are level 95 while I'm level 75. So the proof is definitely in the footage and the potential is very real. Today I'm going to be showing you all the secret tech that I found over the last 4 or 5 days or so, using this build absolutely non-stop so you can get in there and get right into the action and having fun. By the way, if you want a full written description of this build, you can check out the link in the description below to head on over to Mobalytics to get a full in-depth guide on this build start to finish. So if you're looking for the best information on the market on all things Diablo, do yourself a favor and head on over to Mobalytics. Now, starting things off with our ability loadouts, we're going to be picking up Blade Shift for the massive amount of movement speed, as well as the ability to move through mobs, and it also gives us more survivability against non-physical resistances. I think this basic ability is incredibly underrated, and something important to note is that it also has the fastest attack speed by far out of all the basic rogue abilities in the game, so for building combo points, it's very, very strong. Of course, we are going to be taking Barrage with the Advanced Barrage Enhancement for the increased critical strike chance, which will theoretically be up permanently because we're ricocheting more than 4 times every single time we shoot Barrage. We're also going to be teaching you how to do that a little bit later on in the Paragon board tree, so definitely don't miss out that section as well. We're also going to pick up Poison Trap for the imbuement reset as well as the knockdown effect, and it's even going to help us tremendously on boss fights to apply vulnerability throughout the entirety of the fight. We're going to be taking Shadow Step as well with the Methodical Shadow Step enhancement to stun enemies that are very high priority. This is very useful for taking out elite enemies that you need to kill very quickly, and is a great way to engage on top of leaders that are suppressing your damage against nearby enemies as well. And now the major core for our build, we are grabbing Cold Imbuement with the Mixed Cold Imbuement enhancement to deal great burst damage against crowd-controlled enemies, and double that if they're actually frozen. And to give us a nice 1-2 punch combo to pair with it, we're going to be picking up Shadow Imbuement with the Blended Shadow Imbuement enhancement for the vulnerability on explosions. Combining these attacks in a short window, specifically against crowd-controlled enemies, does amazing burst damage and will pretty much clear an entire screen for you. And for our capstone talent, we are going to select Close Quarters Combat for the 20% attack speed bonus and 20% damage to crowd-controlled enemies. You're going to activate this by alternating between using Blade Shift to build combo points and then Barrage to empty your combo points. So pretty much you're going to permanently have a 20% bonus to attack speed and 20% additional damage to crowd-controlled enemies. It is going to be absolutely amazing for doing everything we need to do with this build and make it a lot faster and smoother. So to take a final look at our skills loadout, it's going to be Blade Shift, Barrage, Poison Trap, Shadow Step, Cold Imbuement, and Shadow Step for elites and monsters. But for bosses, we're actually going to want to use Invigorating Strike instead of Blade Shift for the energy regeneration. And then you're going to want to also swipe out your Icy Alchemist Ring for your Blast Trapper Ring to apply vulnerability, which we'll talk about in just a minute. You have to remember that this build isn't about being long distance and is going to be super comfortable in melee to short range combat. Its survivability thrives in being in close quarters, and your damage will ramp up significantly as well. Moving on to our passives now, you need to take these in the exact order we tell you to if you are below level 50. We're going to be first grabbing Sturdy as well as Siphoning Strikes to make us incredibly tanky when paired with our Barrage and melee range. After that, we're going to put 2 points into Consuming Shadows for the energy regeneration, and make sure you don't have 3 because it is a waste of a point and you will overcap on energy. Weapon Mastery for the critical strike damage on our crossbow, and Frigid Finesse for the big cold imbuement damage combos. Later on, after that, once we start getting into the mid-game, we're going to take Innervation for the energy regeneration on lucky hits to help us with our energy deprivation, Haste to increase our movement speed as well as an attack speed bonus in general, Malice for the 9% damage to vulnerable targets, and finally, Reactive Defense to increase our survivability when we are crowd controlled. Moving on now to our legendary aspects. It's very important to know, ladies and gentlemen, that this build does require a couple of aspects to actually perform incredibly well. But in general, we are going to focus on aspects and gear that are going to increase our survivability to be able to take a hit in close range. First up, you have Aspect of Branching Volleys for the additional ricochet on your barrage, which comes from Hawazar, and it is absolutely mandatory for this build to increase your damage drastically. The Icy Alchemist aspect for the explosive Shadow Imbuement and Cold Imbuement combos for AoE damage. Accelerating aspect to massively increase your attack speed to build up combo points faster and shoot out barrage arrows more quick, which is always great. And the Smiting aspect for the critical strike increase, as well as the longer crowd control duration, which is going to help all of our setups be longer. Our freezes, our knockdowns, our stuns, all of it. The Conceited aspect to increase our damage when we have a barrier active. I would only take this if you have the Temerity Pants also. And lastly, the most important is going to be for boss fights, is going to be the Blast Trappers aspect for the vulnerability uptime on bosses to increase your damage significantly. You would replace this with the Icy Alchemist Ring whenever you're about to engage in a boss fight. Now, to drastically increase our survivability, we're going to be taking the Cheats Legendary aspect and put it on our Amulet. Having this will increase our damage reduction significantly against targets that are crowd controlled. We're going to have pretty much permanent crowd control effects on enemies around us, so we will have a lot of damage resistance against that. And then after that, you want to grab the aspect of Disobedience, the aspect of Might, and the Umbrous aspect if you don't have the Temerity Pants. Having all this will give you enough time to set up your combos to kill enemies before they even get out of the freeze and knockdown effects. For our gems on our weapons, we're going to be taking the Sapphire for critical strike damage against crowd-controlled enemies, Ruby on our armor for the maximum health, and the Skull on our jewelry for armor across the board. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're just quickly going to be going over the Paragon board as well as stat priority in depth. I get tons of questions on how I'm surviving, level 20 plus mobs, heading into the end game in Nightmare Dungeons, and I'm going to break it down to you right now. I would say the most important thing, though, when it comes to the Barrage build and the Paragon board is going to be the Exploit Glyph. The Exploit Glyph is such a powerful addition to this board. What this does is that when an enemy is damaged by you, they are instantly vulnerable for 3 seconds. Having this paired with our Barrage is going to be super huge because if you don't know, Barrage automatically ricochets if an enemy is vulnerable. That's a 100% chance. So when you engage in combat with a group of enemies, your barrage is going to ricochet off of all of them very, very fast and be instantaneous. You also have, when your barrage ricochets at least 4 times, your next cast gains 20+% crit chance. So not only do you have constant ricochets when you first start a fight, you have crit chance constantly, and then that's not even counting the actual barrage arrows having a percentage chance to split. So arrows are going to be flying absolutely everywhere, and it's going to be mandatory to pick up this glyph and place it and get it socketed to where you can get the 25 strength bonus to get this online up and running. This is the biggest impact you could possibly have. So starting off, I like to go to the right here, grab my damage increase, go down the middle, pick up my glyph socket, and insert the control glyph. This increases our damage dramatically against crowd-controlled enemies. As you can see up top, it's plus 88% damage to crowd-controlled enemies, which is going to be constantly while you're playing this build. And then you also have the bonus with 10% damage to slowed or chilled, and then 20% damage to stunned or frozen, which is going to be constantly as well. We're going to grab the damage increase here, move up, and we're going to attach the Cheap Shot board. The Cheap Shot board does exactly what you need for this build. It is the #1 board for Rogue overall. It gives you damage reduction, high damage to crowd-controlled enemies, survivability, a glyph slot, all the best rare nodes, I think, in the game. It is amazing, absolutely mandatory for this build. Before I was pushing these Nightmare Tier 20 dungeons, I was wondering why I was dying so fast. What the heck is the problem? And I started to really do research and really dig deep and test things out. And it's because I wasn't grabbing all of these defensive nodes on here that will amplify your defensives so much by just investing 5, 6, 7 points. So grabbing these defensive nodes are absolutely mandatory, guys. We have 3% damage reduction, 3%, 3%, and then we have 13. So we got 24% damage reduction on just these 4 nodes right here from elite enemies, which are going to be the most dangerous enemies you can encounter. Grabbing these is 24% damage reduction. Then you also have damage reduction from slowed enemies, 3%, 3%, 3%, and then another 12%. So like you're stacking this tanky, all these tanky nodes and magic nodes to really increase your survivability to be able to deal damage. Because if you can't deal damage in Diablo, you got to go back to the basics. You got to try to understand what the heck my build is even good at. So if you can't deal damage, go back to World Tier 2 or 3, try to figure it out, learn what you got to do, and go back to the drawing board. But after that, we're going to be amplifying our damage to crowd-controlled enemies, amplifying it even more. All these magic nodes are super good. Damage to crowd control, critical strike damage to crowd control. All these are amazing. And then we're going to input our exploit glyph, use these strength nodes around it to give us that bonus of instant vulnerability on everyone. After that, we're going to go out to the top left, grab the more crowd control, grab those armor nodes, more damage, move out to the left, and head on over to the Tricks of the Trade legendary board. I love this board. I think it's amazing. One of the best boards for rogues as well. If you manage to get the procs off with the marksman and the cutthroat action going on, it's very, very effective. I love lining it up to where I get the damage reduction from close enemies as well as dealing more damage to them. Once again, we're going to be more tanky. We're going to head out to the left. We're going to grab all these nodes right here. 6% damage to close enemies, 2% reduction, and then you stack all those together. It's very, very strong. We're going to head on out to the left. For now, I would say rush the Tricks of the Trade legendary node as soon as you can until you get a bunch of nodes after that. Once you get like maybe 9-10 nodes around this mark, you can just empty all of them and fill all this out, because filling all this out right here is more powerful than just having this legendary node. So we would fill all this out, then go grab our Tricks of the Trade, then head on off of this board, and then most likely go to either Eldritch Bounty for the imbuement skill damage or the Deadly Ambush for the trap skill damage, trap damage reduction against enemies affected by trap skills. So Eldritch Bounty or Deadly Ambush after that. This is the Paragon board. This is the route. Here are the tips. We also have the glyph priority and such on the screen now if you want to take a look at it. Now I want to quickly go over the stat priority for our character, because this is super, super crucial and super important. The only reason I'm able to push these nightmare dungeons and destroy everyone in my path is because of my stat priority and my Paragon board. First up, with our necklace, it's a perfect example of what you need on this build. We have high movement speed, healing received, damage reduction from close enemies, and then we have our cheats legendary aspect on there, which we take less damage from crowd-controlled enemies. It is the poster boy of what we need for this build. After that, we have our chest piece, another great example. Damage reduction from close enemies, imbuement skill damage, cold damage, basic skills grant damage reduction. We're dealing more damage, but we're taking a lot less. You have to make sure, ladies and gentlemen, you get those right stats. Mouse over all of those rare items. I don't care how long it takes. You pick them up, mouse over it, do the work. This is how you become incredibly powerful in a very fast time. After that, on our headpiece, we're grabbing, plus ranks to our imbuement skills, which is Shadow and Cold. Cooldown reduction to, have them up quicker. And then we're grabbing more Dexterity. I mean, you could re-roll the Dexterity. I just don't want to spend all the gold and Forgotten Souls. So I'm going to hold off on it for now. Once again, we have our rings. We have our Mother's Embrace, obviously, to give us energy regen. We have our crit damage, damage to crowd control, max energy. We're dealing big, big damage with this ring here. And I would say the only time you would switch this ring would be for the Blast Trapper's Aspect ring, and that is to make bosses vulnerable. The only time you would ever use this is to make bosses vulnerable, because obviously boss fights are going to be longer than 3 seconds. So you want to have vulnerability on them as much as you can. If you have it on them, you'll deal a lot more damage. But when you aren't in boss engagements and you're fighting elites, you can use the Icy Alchemist ring. It is very, very effective. Going on to our weapons, we're going to go two-handed enchantment on the branching volleys. 48% chance to have our barrage arrows split into 2 arrows. Very, very effective. And you're going to make sure you absolutely need a crossbow in this slot. You do not want a bow, because a crossbow gives us a instant rolled vulnerability damage guaranteed on the top. As you can see, it says 56% vulnerability damage on the top. So we want crossbow. And then once again, we're going to be taking damage to crowd controlled enemies, whether they slowed, frozen, whatever it may be, and damage to close enemies, whatever you can get your hands on along those lines. In our example, we have slowed, frozen, crowd controlled, vulnerable, and dexterity. Massive, massive damage boost. And the DPS of this weapon is absolutely ludicrous. It's an 831 with the upgrade on it. We are crushing people with this weapon. Once again, on our daggers, we're looking for damage to close, damage to crowd control, all that sort of stuff. That's the whole gist of the stat priority. Remember, you will get one-shotted if you try to run in there with a barrage build and have no damage reduction. Please I'm begging you, don't do it. I was trying it the first day. It wasn't working out right. You want that damage reduction to close enemies, damage to close enemies, damage to crowd control, vulnerability, all that fun stuff. That's going to be our stat priorities as well as Paragon board. Let's jump right into the gameplay now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are in game now, and this is going to be pretty much a gameplay breakdown on what you need to do when it comes to rotation and how you should actually play this build effectively. As you can see, we got one of the most annoying affixes in the game, but we're going to see if we can't do something about that. Before we even start combat, we're going to make sure we have our potion active. I think there is like maggots and stakes in here. I could be completely wrong, but we're going to have our potion active to try and increase our damage as much as possible. Before combat engagement starts, we're going to make sure we have our cold imbuement active, and then we're going to get this show on the road. Our whole goal is to build up 3 combo points, get as close as we can to targets, aim our barrage in the general direction of most enemies, and let it fly, dude. And it is very, very, very effective, and we'll be showing you guys that, hopefully, right now. So we have our 3 combo points. We're going to focus on the leaders right here. A lot of tough mobs in here. We actually don't have any creatures that I see that are maggots or wildlife, so we're not getting actually any benefit from our potion. If we get them all grouped up in shadow imbuement, the ricochets actually carry all of the imbuements and do all the work for us. So it's actually very straightforward what you have to do on this build. It's just about performing it properly. We got 2 enemies right here. We got to get inside of this. Everyone is unstoppable. Deal our big, big shadow burst damage while they're clumped up. We're going to jump on this guy. Triple imbuement. Now, when he's vulnerable, we can kill him in a couple shots. The goal, ladies and gentlemen, is just make sure you're keeping up the pressure and deal as much damage as you can while they are vulnerable, because that is a big, big damage window for you. While they're vulnerable, you can crush people. So we're going to try to get up right up close and personal. We have an elite mob here. We're going to dive in on him. 3 combo points. And that's pretty much all she wrote. And it's the same case with all your imbuement skills. Your imbuement skills is what really is going to pack a serious punch for you. With your imbuements, you hit like an absolute Mack truck. We have enemies right here. Big shadow imbuements here as well. Cold imbuement, get rid of them. Gonna drop our trap. Going to deal massive, massive damage to everyone here. Gonna wait for our time. 3 combo points, shadow imbuement, 3 combo points, cold imbuement, drop our trap on these guys, and just really dance in and out of combat when we need to. We're going to use our mobility. Look, I mean, I could run around right here for an hour if I really wanted to. We're going to go cold imbuement. Going to do our AoE with our 3-point combo point barrage here. Have our shadow imbuement finish up the work. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now for the boss engagement, it's very important to know that you don't need a lot of AoE damage anymore. So we're actually going to swap off our Icy Alchemist ring, and we are going to put on the Blast Trapper Circle. This will help us with damage, on the boss, because we're going to consistently trap him and apply vulnerability a lot more. Also, when it comes to our abilities, we are going to make sure that we grab Invigorating Strike. So we're going to talent out of this right now, because energy regeneration at times could be kind of an issue for boss fights when it comes with the barrage build. So we are going to simply swap on Invigorating Strike. We can keep the combo points. The combo points is fine. It's just Invigorating Strike will help us with energy regeneration, and the vulnerability on traps will increase our damage overall. We're going to activate our cold imbuement before we even engage, and then we're going to start the engagement here. We're going to wait for him to come out. Drop our trap. We didn't get any procs, which is okay. Just keeping our energy regeneration rather high with the upkeep of the Invigorating Strike. And then we're going to cold imbuement 3 times. And then try to just get rid of him if we can in that stagger window. We were a little bit off. But either way, the damage is pretty high during that stagger window if you pull it off properly. And at this point, we could just literally lollygag through the fight. Stagger windows are your go-to when it comes to bosses. You want to make sure that you save your cold imbuement for those stagger windows. And I would say definitely grab Invigorating Strike for the boss engagements. You don't need Invigorating Strike for elites and minions and monsters because you wipe them out in seconds. Energy is never a problem because Shadow and Beam it procs and then pops everyone. You get your energy. But for boss engagements, I would highly recommend grabbing Invigorating Strike. And then I would highly, highly recommend grabbing the Blast Trapper Circle. This will make sure that you have vulnerability constantly on them as well. So all of that combined, you'll knock down bosses pretty quick. Overall, ladies and gentlemen, very, very, very fun build. It is my highest Nightmare tier pushing build so far. I would say just remember, focus on grabbing defensives, damage resistance against close enemies, and dealing more damage to close, vulnerable, and crowd-controlled enemies, and you'll be fine. But okay, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to wrap up my endgame barrage build for pushing Nightmare Dungeons as high as you possibly can. This build has absolutely been insane for me personally. I am so happy that I'm playing it. I've just been smashing through every encounter that I've come across, no matter what it is. It's super fun because everything here is completely unique and different to everything I've done before, and I honestly think that this is going to be my favorite build heading into Season 1 of the Diablo 4 game. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and subscribe as it helps out the channel tremendously. And remember, we have a ton of giveaways coming this month like Razer gaming products, Diablo 4 game copies, and even the physical collector's edition. So make sure you check the link in the description for more information on winning that. I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. It's an absolute pleasure to be making content for you all. Until the very end, my name is Sky from the Comeback Kids. I will see you all in the next one. Peace!